Men of Reddit, what do women do that they think is okay but is actually very creepy? Went out with a group of guys last weekend. There were 6 of us and this random girl started hanging around us like a lost puppy and just wouldn't leave. She was attractive, but so obviously desperate for attention that none of our group of guys really cared to give her any. This girl was just looking at everyone, batting her eyes and trying to hug everyone, but the guys were just pawning her off on each other. Not sure if this is pathetic more than creepy, but if a guy did the same thing, he'd be labeled with creepy, so yeah. She was creepy to me. I honestly thought she was a hooker or something trying to sell services or some shit, the way she was approaching dudes. It's not fucking normal. Men of Reddit, what's the hardest thing to explain to women? Why we bottle up our emotions. This. My wife and I lost a dog in our 2nd year of marriage. He was sick for a month and she was crying softly about it on a daily basis. I was extremely sad, but never cried. Then when they took him away at the vet's office I cried loudly and uncontrollably for what felt like an hour, probably realistically like 45 seconds though, and just couldn't calm myself down. In the car she said, "You know, if you didn't bottle it up and let it out a little at a time you wouldn't get like that." What she didn't understand at that moment is that for a lot of men, we don't have that middle ground of crying, it's either nothing or everything. A lot of us never learn how to cry in a semi-controlled manner because we never saw a man do that when we were young. I'm 40 years old and I've never seen my father cry, not at any of our weddings, not at his parents' funerals, nothing. In other words, I've never had that subconscious model of how a man is supposed to cry, and don't have any practice at it. When I try to make myself cry, I can. Whereas my wife can watch any commercial with sick animals, cry quietly for 5 seconds and then be done with it. Men of Reddit, when was the last time you cried and why? My friend and gym partner unalived himself on November 5th and I didn't know for a whole week. I was texting him daily things like, "Hey man, where are you at? Are we lifting today? Did I do something wrong? Why aren't you replying? Hey man, if you don't respond to this message I'm calling the police for a welfare check." And then a friend found the GoFundMe on Facebook. I cried so hard and loud that I heard my roommate approach my door to knock. He heard me through the door, and did a quick about face to retreat back to his room. Today someone approached me in the gym saying, "Hey man, do you know what happened to Ryan? He was in my class and just stopped showing up one day last semester." And I went full deer in the headlights before straightforwardly answering he unalived himself, then returning to my workout to avoid the emotions and awkwardness. I started drinking at 8 a.m. today, so I got that going for me. What did your friend do that accidentally turned you on? I always went by an abbreviation of my name. He was the only person to always use my full name. Dunno why, but always made me weak. A girl I became friends with on a school trip in high school fell asleep on my shoulders on the ride back. I'm 28 and I'm still coasting on that memory. I was making coffee in my AeroPress for us and pressing slowly on the top of it like you're supposed to, when she shouldered me over a little and leaned on my hand to push it down faster. It was cute as F and I'll never forget it. A group of us went to a firework display and during the usual louder and bigger finale fireworks she jumped, grabbed my arm tight and didn't let go. Not sure what happened inside me, but yeah, that did it. I was once speaking to this customer and I couldn't understand her because of her thick Russian accent. So my coworker stepped in and started speaking fluent Russian and I swear it was the hottest thing ever. I definitely have a thing for accents because that shit was putting me in some type of mood. At the school dance a friend who I had a crush on came over and sat on my lap, despite there being plenty of free chairs next to me, and just casually had a conversation. She was pulling me like aggressively but playfully. There came this weird comfort I had never felt even from my parents. Lol. What is the most interesting statistic you know? 18% of all boating accidents are caused by people trying to pee over the side. The Canadian Red Cross did a study of all water-related deaths between 1991 and 2008. Table 8 on page 39 states that between 91 to 08, 62 people lost their lives from urinating from their watercraft. That only makes 3% of total deaths due to urination. I couldn't find an online source about how many accidents, not resulting in death, were attributed to urinating over the side of the boat. But my boating instructor gave me the number 18%, and I've always trusted that number. The fact that they keep a record of deaths due to urination, and that yachting insurance companies warn about the dangers of urinating over the side of the boat makes me think that accidents not resulting in death is much higher than 3%. I did a ding-dong ditch on my neighbor because I was a petty child. This was back when I was about 11, so I was still an immature little shit but also petty as hell. My neighbor yelled at me, my brother, and my friend for something along the lines of us finding something that we thought was hers. I don't think it was, so me, my brother, and my friend thought of a way to get her back. Suddenly I thought we should ding-dong ditch her, so I run up to the door, ring the doorbell and run back behind our car. I just remembered this and realized how much of a petty shit I was. What is the most unprofessional thing a doctor has ever said to you? When I was working with mentally and physically disabled children we had this really sweet girl. She was around 10 years old, had Down syndrome, was really heavy mentally disabled but one of the happiest human beings I have ever met. She became really sick, don't know what it was, and was delivered to a hospital. When I visited her she lost a lot of weight and I asked the doctor why she gets no artificial feeding. He answered a normal person would get fed but she isn't for natural selection. I was shocked and told the girl's mother. She was just sad because it wasn't the first time something like this happened. Atheists of Reddit, what could change your mind? Proof that cannot be fabricated. The Bible is meant to be the word of God, but it was written down by humans. The Bible cannot be trusted simply because it may have all been made up from the beginning, and it could have been altered completely during its 2,000 years of existence. If someone wanted to change the Bible 1,400 years ago, we'd be none the wiser. Not to mention the fact that meaning can be lost and misinterpreted when translating the Bible into different languages. The only way I'm changing my mind is if I physically see a god do something that no human can do. Water into wine won't work on me. Sleight of hand magicians are insanely talented. I'm gonna need an elephant to appear out of thin air. Lmao. What is your most embarrassing moment in public? Went to a day camp as a young kid. We went swimming so I changed out of my underwear into my swim shorts. When I came back to get changed after I couldn't find my undies anywhere. I looked and looked but was going to be late for the closing ceremony for the week before I went home. Frustrated because I knew I'd get a good slap in the head from my parents for losing my clothing. At the end of the ceremony they did lost and found. The counselor of course pulls out my tidy brownies and holds them over his head and I can hear everybody like 50 people giggling. I was so scared of coming home without them I took the walk of shame and got them and when I walked back literally every single person in that hall laughed their ass off at me lol. I rarely get embarrassed by anything anymore because of this. It was an embarrassment overload that fried my brain that day. What was the incident at your school? Teacher with brain damage, mid-class starts acting a little weird, twitching etc. He then starts mumbling incoherently which got the attention of one of my peers across the room. My peer speaks up and asks teacher if he's okay. Teacher picks up a effing hammer, wood shop, and heaves at full strength at my peer. Thankfully it missed and smashed through a window and smashed another teacher's car windscreen. The wood shop teacher then screams get the F out. We all run out of class and down the corridor. We stop when we hear a blood-curdling scream and a few, including me, ran back to the room. The teacher cut his effing thumb off with a circular saw. I administered first aid, got his thumb on ice and got counseling. Was forever called Tom Thumb afterward and teacher was retired and got committed. Never heard from him again. As a teenager what was the worst thing your parents ever walked in on you doing? Oh god, time to tell this story. So basically, my girlfriend at the time and I were home alone, and started watching a movie. We got to the part of the movie where both of our shirts are off and her pants are down around her ankles when suddenly we hear a car pull up in the driveway. We were on the couch in my TV room, which is pretty much right off the main entrance. Scramble, shirts get back on just in time, but with my entire family crashing into the room, the pants are still firmly south of the border. Fortunately, we're both still under a blanket with the movie on. Somewhat less fortunately, we're watching some Disney movie, so everyone is sticking around. The lights are off, so it's not super obvious just how guilty we look, and while everyone is distracted we pretend to be looking at something on my phone while typing out a plan to each other. Plan initiated. I drop my phone, and in the process of retrieving it, grab her pants and bring them up to her knees. She then stretches out, letting me pull pants up to about mid-thigh level. So far so good. Now for the hard part. We wait about 5 minutes for a big song, so everyone is distracted looking at the screen and singing along. She stands up, and in the same motion I pull her pants the rest of the way up, and she quickly goes into the bathroom to put everything in order. Nobody seems to notice. Crisis averted. What's a random obscure fact you know? Al Capone is responsible for expiration dates on milk. He lobbied the Chicago City Council to make it a law while he was trying to transition from bootlegging to a legitimate dairy business. There's some speculation to his motives, including stories about sour milk in his childhood or a family member who got sick on an expired bottle. More likely it was an effort to increase sales by shortening shelf life. What conspiracy theory do you genuinely believe? NASA astronauts Mark Lee and Jan Davis definitely had sex in space for research purposes. They were the only married couple to go to space together. The mission they flew on, STS-47, was specifically for materials and life science research in microgravity. And the kicker, the mission flew with a Space Lab module in the cargo bay which provide a private area for the astronauts to carry out the experiments. What hasn't changed in the past 1,000 years? The humble axe. While the axe did go through several major design shifts over the course of human history. By the time we get to 1022, we had already settled on a more or less straight haft with a head made of iron steel, with an opening or eye that the haft goes through. If you walked into any big box hardware store and bought a Collins axe and then took it back to 1022 and showed it to someone, they'd think the style was strange and they'd be astonished to find that the whole head was made of steel, but that's it. They'd be all, yeah, that's an axe. Obviously from some foreign country where everyone's rich, but it's just an axe. What is the weirdest thing you had to do at someone else's house because of their culture religion? I worked for a rental car company in an Orthodox Jewish community. A customer rushed in on a Friday evening and asked to be driven home immediately because if we didn't make it to his house by sundown he would have to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way, due to the Sabbath. He used an app on his phone to tell him the exact time of sundown each day. I didn't have a driver available I just told him to go home and I'll come by his house later to grab the car. A half hour later I arrive at his house. Husband is nowhere to be found, and the following scenario ensues with his wife. My husband left the keys on our bedside table and I'm not allowed to touch them. Can you come in and grab them please? I awkwardly follow her into her bedroom and grab them from the bedside table. Can I ask one more favor? Do you mind unplugging the house for me? I then follow her into her basement and enter a room where there are literally 15 to 20 different electrical cords coming through holes in the walls and ceiling. And through a tangled series of different outlet strips are all consolidated into one master plug going into a standard wall outlet. She points at it and asks me to unplug it. I do. She thanks me. Leave. I had a lot of wild experiences in 5 years working the job. This one was definitely top 5. What was the cruelest punishment you ever got growing up? I was not specifically being punished, but it was a bit traumatic as a kid all the same. In the small African town I grew up in, lethal injection was available as a punishment, by snakebite. A neighbor was convicted of a capital crime. He was to be bitten on both ankles by a puff adder, and returned to his home under the watch of a guard to die with his family. I came to find it was not a mercy. I could hear his screams and cries from our own home. His wife was allowed to comfort him and provide water to drink, but not to help soothe the agony. He was cuffed to a restraining reclining chair and couldn't move. He finally died on the 3rd day. If he had lasted much longer they would have administered a 3rd and 4th bite. What happened to your school, bad boy? My biggest bully in middle high school ended up going to prison. Funny though, my mom worked in that prison, and they got to know each other. When he got out, he found me and apologized. He later got a job at a local Taco Bell, and whenever I came in he would always add a bunch of free stuff to my order. I haven't seen him in almost 2 decades, but I know he became a dad. I actually hope he's doing well. Edit. Just looked him up. Had 3 kids, a wife, and is a contractor now. I'm glad he turned it around. Not sure how this happened, but there were 3 bad boys on our football team, all players and all very good looking. They cussed, drank, smoked all the time, and were constantly getting laid, or at least telling everyone they were. Right around senior year college they each went through some change and are all now born again Christians. No partying, less cussing, and none of them talk about women in an objectifying way. It's great but kinda unnerving in a way. Got a girl pregnant, abused, killed the baby, and he's still in prison 12 plus years. He's not the best younger brother, but what can you do? Night shift workers, what's the scariest experience you've ever had? I used to be the only person manning the overnight help desk for an IT company. I would get there just as the last folks were leaving for the night and I had the entire office to myself. After a month or so on the job I started hearing noises around the office, creaking floors, weird vocalizations, or random guttural gagging sounds. At first I didn't really pay it any mind. It was an older office and it made weird noises, but then I noticed that when I'd step out for lunch, or to use the bathroom, I'd come back and there were lights on that I didn't turn on, or cabinets open that I didn't touch. I was 100% sure there was some slasher maniac just hiding under a desk waiting to kill me. Turns out one of our managers was in the middle of moving house and due to a schedule screw-up he didn't have a place to live and had been crashing in his office with the door closed. What I was hearing was him trying to sneak around in his office without alerting me, and the gagging noises I was hearing was him snoring. He was embarrassed at the situation so he'd wait for me to leave my desk and dash out to grab a drink or some snacks from the supply closet.